Hello, my beautiful friends. I am Laurel Bleadon-Maffei with Illuminating Souls, welcoming you to this episode of Sleepy Bedtime Blessings, a podcast designed to help you rest, relax, and fall asleep, all while deepening in your connection with your beautiful team of angels who love you so. I am an angelic practitioner, a spiritual teacher, and an encourager of souls. It's the most wonderful job. I launched my business in January of 2006, and this has been my full-time work ever since, and I feel so utterly blessed. My offerings include one-on-one angel sessions, soul mentoring, and a variety of classes that my hope is will inspire your spirit. And you can learn more at my website, illuminatingsouls.com, where you can also sign up for my mailing list. And I'm about to launch my first angel oracle deck called the Earth Angels Oracle. I'm so excited about it, and I will probably be releasing it in the next week or so. So stay tuned. I'm thrilled to be able to share it with you. And if you sign up for my mailing list on my homepage, you will receive all the announcements. But for now, the angels and I are here to help you come into a beautiful expanse of rest. So I invite you to take a nice deep breath in and just release, allowing yourself to come present to this moment and to get comfortable in whatever way works best for you. I love listening to sleep podcasts as I get ready to drift off to sleep. So what I do is I curl up in bed and I use wired earphones and I pick an episode. Sometimes I listen to this podcast, so yes, this one works well for me. I also listen to the Sleepy Bookshelf and Sleepy and Get Sleepy. Sleepy is a good word to look for if you're looking for sleep podcasts. And I turn the volume down lower than I would if I were listening to an audiobook. And I set the sleep timer. I usually set the sleep timer for 45 minutes. And I'm usually asleep before the sleep timer turns off. And so whether you listen to this podcast during your waking hours or you listen to it as an invitation for sleep, it is a wonderful blessing to get to be here with you in this moment. As I record this, it is early morning. It's quite still out, and it's oddly humid. We don't have humidity typically here in the Bay Area, at least where we live. And so everything feels a bit heavy and still and definitely conducive to sleepiness. So I share these beautiful, sleepy vibes with you. And I'm going to bring the angels in. They are here already, but I love the ritual of sharing them with you. So again, just take a beautiful, nice, big, deep breath in and just release. Release whatever came before this moment. As the angels bring their energy closer to you. And beautiful angels on high, I invite you to join us here. I ask that you infuse this broadcast with waves of love, waves of healing, waves of compassion and understanding. helping to lighten our load in service to our highest and best good. That if we are carrying anything that isn't really ours, that we need not carry, we ask that you lift this from us and infuse us with goodness and love, lightness of spirit and inspiration. And just take a nice deep breath in and release. And if you have any prayers or intentions that you would like to share with the angels, we invite you to do so now. And you can do this at any time. You need not have a podcast to converse with your angels, but sometimes it's nice to be invited. So I invite you to share your heart with your angels. How can they support you? Is there someone that you love that you would like to send extra blessings to? We can do that together right now. Just bring them into your heart and add whatever prayer you want. So angels, please help make their day brighter. Please make things easy for them today. Please help lift any heaviness they might be feeling. Please let them know that they are loved and supported and celebrated. Whatever your prayer is. And the angels will then carry your heart's desire into the heavenly realms and amplify them. So it's always such a blessing that we can share prayers for others as well. And they get amplified by the angels. So whether you're praying for a person you love or one of the beautiful beloved animals in your life, praying for people in another part of the world, praying for a situation, praying for an area, praying for Mother Earth, or praying for yourself. The angels help to amplify the prayers of our hearts. And you know, one of the things that I love so much about this path that I have found myself on is it has made prayer so accessible and easy, that in this way of contemplating our connection with God or Source, prayers need not be formal. It doesn't have to be a set of words handed down thousands of years ago. Those types of prayers are also quite powerful and beautiful, so I'm not diminishing them in any way. I grew up Jewish, and to this day there are prayers that speak to my heart so deeply because they do have the energy of thousands of years of my ancestors behind them. But there is also something that is so very precious and accessible about informally praying from our hearts and praying for each other. I am always so deeply touched when someone says, "I'm praying for you," or "I said a prayer for you." I don't think of that as just some rote social grace that we say to each other. It's one of the reasons I pray out loud before every session, every class, and even in this podcast, because I want you to have the experience of knowing that I am praying for you and with you. And praying can mean a lot of things. For me in this moment, what it means is there is such love in my heart. And because I've asked the angels to be here, that love is amplified. And so there is beautiful presence here. And so I share this beautiful presence with you. I ask this beautiful presence to be amplified in service to your highest and best good, that you receive it, that you feel it, that you know that it is here. And when we pray for each other and with each other, it is so utterly beautiful. At the University of Santa Monica, where I got my degree in spiritual psychology, the words that they used was sending the light. Send the light. Hold them in the light. It's a beautiful way of describing it. And I shared this story with you before, but I don't expect you to remember everything I've ever shared with you, so it's worth sharing again. That there was this one time that I had a very visceral experience of receiving the light. And you know, there are aspects of this work or this spiritual path that I'm on that I believe in on faith. But other things I believe because I have had my own personal experiences of it. And that actually is the case for much of what I do. So, years ago, my dog Tessa was very sick. She was in her senior years. She was in, I guess we'll call it doggy palliative care, which went on for about a year. And I had been volunteering at USM as a reader. And that meant that there was a team of us that helped verify the students' homework. And we would go there to the university on Friday nights and Saturday. And we would grade the students' papers so they would get their homework back before the weekend was over. And I was very committed to the program. I rarely missed my weekends there because I loved it so much. But on this particular Friday, my dog Tessa was very, very sick. And so I had to opt out of reading that Friday night so I could stay home with her. And the leader of the program, I had talked to him, and he said, well, we'll put you and Tessa in the light, which is a very USM thing to do. And so when we were in the reader's circle, we would always call in the light as the group of readers, and people would share. And then at the end of the sharing circle, they would list off the people they were putting in the light. So send light for so-and-so's father, send light for this person. And that night, they added, and please send light to Laurel and her dog Tessa. I'm assuming that's what they said. I was not there. But here's where the magic comes in. I had forgotten all about this. I was exhausted. I had probably been up in the wee hours of the morning taking Tessa to urgent care. I don't really remember, but I remember being that exhausted. So I was on the couch just mindlessly watching television, and Tessa was on her little bed that I had put together for her, which was a comforter and one of those egg carton foam crates. And we were both zonked out. And at about 7 o'clock, which is when they're closing the reader's circle, all of a sudden, I felt this wave of beautiful, gorgeous energy wash over me. And Tessa woke up and she kind of picked her head up off the floor and looked at me and she's like, whoa, what's that? And all of a sudden it occurred to me, that was the light. I said, Tessa, they just sent us the light. That was the light. That we both felt it at that moment. And I looked at the clock. And sure enough, it was 7 o'clock, which is when they would have been closing the reader circle, or right before 7, whatever that time frame was. That would have been the time they were sending the light. It was a magical experience. It's not as if I had been waiting for the light and then imagined it came to me. I'd completely forgotten about it. I was zonked out to any reference of time, as was my dog. She doesn't tell time. And at that same exact moment, we both felt it. And I kind of perked up and she perked up and we looked at each other. And I was like, that was the light, Tessa. That sent us the light. And ever since then, I'm very confident in the light and prayers. And, it's that adage, wherever two or more are gathered in the name of the divine, miracles happen. So in this broadcast, we are in virtual time together, even though you might be listening to this weeks, months, or years later. Angels and light and prayer are not bound by time and space in the same way we are. So right now, I am sending you light and the angels are sending you light. And the light is flowing to you, even if you cannot feel it. It is so. I affirm it is so. And so I send prayers of love to you. You are so beautiful and so precious in this world. And I'm so deeply grateful for an opportunity to love you, to celebrate you, and to honor you. The world is better because you are here. So thank you for being you. So you go ahead and cozy on up and snuggle on in. If you're getting ready for bed, and if you're in the middle of the day, maybe just take a nice deep breath in and affirm that goodness and love are with you right now. And so while you rest, we are going to move on into story time. And I have a really wonderful story time for you. So here we go. So for story time, we have another TV Guide episode. And many of you have told me that these TV Guide episodes are among your favorite. And I think it's because it's so relatable. Right? So many of us grew up watching television, and somehow reviewing these old issues bring back memories. And this is going to be a special TV Guide episode that I am dedicating to my cousin Susie Bleadon for her birthday. So happy birthday, Bleadon. And I'm laughing because the cover of this TV Guide, which is July 23rd to 29th, 1983, has Knots Landing on the cover. So, Bleedin', this is why I texted you yesterday. So, I was positive that Knots Landing had been one of her favorite shows. And when I saw this particular issue of TV Guide on eBay, I knew I had to get it and do an episode around it. But then yesterday, my confidence waned, and I thought, maybe she liked Falcon Crest. What if I'm wrong and I do a whole episode that includes Knots Landing and she didn't even like the show? So I had to text her yesterday. So that was my cryptic, you're a Knots Landing person, right? That's why I texted that. So we've got the TV Guide, but also maybe you don't know about Knots Landing. I actually did not watch it. I was a Dallas girl, and then I moved into other soap operas, all the ABC soaps, and I wasn't much of a nighttime soap person. But I do remember Susie loving Knots Landing, and then I had my memory affirmed yesterday. So I thought maybe I would start this episode not with a TV Guide, because as it turns out, the TV Guide doesn't have a whole lot about Knots Landing. They're just on the cover that week. I would read to you from the Wikipedia, which I'm allowed to do under the Creative Commons license as long as I attribute it to them. So what I'm going to be reading to you is from the Wikipedia for Knots Landing. So Knots Landing is an American primetime television soap opera that aired on CBS from December 27th, 1979 to May 13th, 1993. So it aired for a long time. And I had forgotten this, it was a spin-off of Dallas. It was set in a fictitious coastal suburb of Los Angeles and initially centered on the lives of 4 married couples living on a cul-de-sac. Cul-de-sacs are always fantastic story vehicles for any show, right? I don't know how many people in the world actually live on cul-de-sacs and if there is any kind of drama centered around it, but if you were judging based on television programs, including Knots Landing, and I even have watched Sister Wives, and when they lived on the cul-de-sac in Las Vegas, cul-de-sacs seemed to be a hotbed of activity. And in Knots Landing, the cul-de-sac was called Sea View Circle. Sounds lovely. Throughout its 14-year run, storylines included, and then there's a whole list of everything you could imagine, which I will not go into right now. And by the time of its conclusion, it had become the 3rd longest running primetime drama on U.S. television after Gunsmoke and Bonanza. I didn't know that. And the last scripted primetime drama show that debuted in the 70s to leave the air. Knots Landing was created by David Jacobs, a one-time writer of Family, which was a wonderful show, and later producer of Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, which I did not know. That was a great show. In conjunction with the producer of Michael Fillerman, who would also later co-produce Falcon Crest, which I mentioned earlier. Although a spin-off of Dallas, the concept predates that series and was rebuffed by CBS in 1977. So they originally didn't want to do that, but then they decided they would adapt Knots Landing as a spin-off of Dallas. Though initially not as popular in the ratings as Dallas, and Dallas was a blockbuster back then, right? Who Shot JR and all that. Knots Landing ultimately outlasted it and garnered much critical acclaim. There were 344 episodes spanning 14 seasons, and much of the cast reunited for a 2-part mini-series, called Knots Landing Back to the Cul-de-Sac, and in 2005 they reunited again. Dallas itself was revived in 2012 with Gary and Valine Ewing appearing in its 2nd episode. So Knots Landing originally occupied Thursday night at 10 o'clock, and for a while it was moved to 9 o'clock when Falcon Crest was moved to Thursday nights. But it was sort of a Thursday night thing, Knots Landing. All right, should we get into the backstory here? Gary Ewing, played by Ted Shackelford, who's on the cover of this TV guide, was the middle son and black sheep of the Ewing family from Dallas. His father, Jock, played by Jim Davis, and elder brother, JR, of course played by Larry Hagman, had never treated him as an equal and viewed him as a weak link, great fodder for any soap opera. At 17, Gary ran away from home and met 15-year-old waitress Valine Clements, played by Joan Van Ark, and quickly married her, producing a daughter, Lucy, played by Charlene Tilton. How many of you came of age during these TV watching years, and it's all coming back to you now, right? That's what's happening to me. The family arrived to the South Fork Ranch, the Ewing homestead, and found that Gary had risen in his family's estimations. Jock liked Valine and was proud to be a grandfather, and Gary's mother, Miss Ellie, I loved her, played by Barbara Bel Geddes, was thrilled to have him at home. At his parents' insistence, J.R. started including him in dealings in Ewing oil, but J.R. landed him with failing business deals and made it appear that Gary was at fault. These pressures forced Gary into alcoholism, and unable to cope with disappointing the family, he fled South Fork, leaving Valine and Lucy behind. Was it Valine or Valine? I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing the character's name. So lots more happened. I'm not going to read all of this because we do want to get to the TV guide. So lots of soap-worthy activities are happening. And this seems important. Years later, Bobby Ewing, played by Patrick Duffy, and his wife Pamela, played by Victoria Principal, found Gary working as a waiter in Las Vegas, and they convinced him to return home and visit Miss Ellie. At the same time, Lucy discovered that Valine had returned to Dallas and was working as a waitress in a diner, and began meeting with her in secret to avoid JR's wrath. So, lots happened. So 14 seasons. So 14 years of strife and drama and awesome nighttime soap opera fantasticness. And these were some of the characters. We already said Gary Ewing was played by Ted Shackelford. Valine Ewing was played by Joan Van Ark. Abby, played by Donna Mills, who has the most beautiful eyes ever. Mac was played by Kevin Dobson, and Greg was played by William Devane. So, Ode to Knots Landing. So the cover of Knots Landing is actually featuring a story about Ted Shackelford, but it has Joan Van Ark and Donna Mills on the cover with Ted Shackelford. So now on to the general TV guide fare for this episode. So there's a giant ad in this episode. So again, 1983, introducing NutraSweet. You can't buy it, but you're gonna love it. So this must have been the introduction of aspartame, which is NutraSweet. NutraSweet is the brand name, and aspartame, I think, must be the chemical name or something like that. And it would be added to everything in the coming years. So, a 2-page spread about NutraSweet. And I do remember at the time, because I was always very diet focused, being thrilled about the development of NutraSweet. You know, that it was in everything. Hot chocolate and Crystal Light. Do you guys remember when Crystal Light hit the market? How exciting that was to be able to make lemonade and things like that. And then as we flip through the pages, we do get to the article about Ted Shackelford, which I'm not going to read because it is copyrighted. But the headline says, I'm obsessive, addictive, and compulsive. So apparently, he had some challenges. I'm assuming he overcame them, because otherwise why write the article about it? It says, for 3 years on Knots Landing, Ted Shackelford was a time bomb waiting to explode. This season, the producers set him off. I have no idea what that's about. I have not read this article. But it's interesting, the writer's using words like, there's something dangerously intense lurking beneath Shackelford's blonde good looks. It's his menacing intensity that got him his break on Knots Landing. So it's an interesting spin. So again, I didn't read the whole article. I just was gleaning certain words from it that I thought were interesting. Now I get to the TV Insider, which gives us a little update on what's happening in the world of television. And this one I thought was interesting. So they're saying that Kate Jackson will appear in CBS's new series, Scarecrow and Mrs. King. How many of you remember that show? That was wonderful. That was with Bruce Boxleitner. I actually really enjoyed this show. So this is what she did after Charlie's Angels, and I seem to recall that Scarecrow and Mrs. King was on the air for several years. It was a pretty good show. One of the things they're featuring in this issue is Billy Joel is doing a live concert? Or maybe it's a taped concert. But he's doing a concert for HBO. I seem to recall this because it was a really big deal. He's always been an amazing showman, or like an amazing performer. I remember I got to see him in concert once. And so, I don't know, I just have this vague memory that this was a big deal. But we didn't have HBO at the time, so I wouldn't have been able to see it. I guess also, you know what I haven't done about this issue is I have forgotten to set a timeline on where I was in my life. Not that I expect you to care, but But in 1983, I would have been 21 years old. I was a junior in college. I was going to Columbia College in Chicago studying television broadcast. So I was still living at home with my parents. I was probably working at Montgomery Ward's and then commuting to downtown Chicago to go to school. I think we probably had a VCR by this time because I don't remember having to rush home to watch General Hospital. So we may have had a VCR by this point, but I'm not sure we had HBO. They do have a soaps section, and it's interesting. They have a snippet about General Hospital that I don't remember at all. So at this point, Jeannie Francis had left the show. So it says, Luke, remember when Luke met up with the waitress Shirley on the Lonesome Pines Trail? I have zero recollection of that. He was still carrying a torch for Holly. So I do remember that storyline. But Holly married Robert when she thought Luke was dead. Vaguely remember that. Anyways, where it's getting to is Shirley has moved to Port Charles. And I guess they're trying to find out if they'll have chemistry or something. I don't remember any of that, so I don't know that I was even that into General Hospital at that point. I think once Jeannie Francis left, I don't know how interested I was in it. I mean, I still watched it on and off for many, many years, but I have zero recollection of that particular storyline. Here's a story that is very timely. As I record this, both the Screen Actors Guild and the Writers Guild of America are on strike. And one of the big points of disparity between the producers and the guilds, the unions, are about royalties for streaming. Well, streaming didn't exist back in '83, but there's an article here talking about how James Garner filed a $22.5 million lawsuit against Universal, saying that the studio cheated him out of the profits from the Rockford Files. And I happen to remember vaguely about this story. It was a big story at the time, and there was a lot of conversation about how the studios do their accounting and what they call profit and things like that. So I don't remember how it resolved, but I do remember that at the time. So as with all TV guides, we start on Saturday morning. I didn't really watch television on Saturday mornings. I would probably be sleeping at this point. So let's flip through and we'll get to Saturday evening. So Saturday evening starts with a Walt Disney movie, The Kids Who Knew Too Much, which sounds strange, with Sharon Gless. So I guess children become targets after stumbling upon a plot to assassinate a Russian premier. Different Strokes is on, so we're running with the apartment building's strict new manager, and his bully son could get the Drummonds evicted from their penthouse. T.J. Hooker, which I barely remember, I don't know that I ever saw an episode, but it did have William Shatner in it, and Heather Locklear. Fran Hooker and Stacy, played by Lee Bryant and Heather Locklear, are taken hostage in a hospital by robbers who are trying to break out their wounded cohort. And this one goes out to my friend David, who loves horror movies. You could watch The Fearless Vampire Killers. Roman Polanski directed this slapstick spoof of horror thrillers. So, and if that's not your cup of tea, for the rest of you, Lawrence Welk is on. And there are other movies, including on Showtime. If you received pay television, Showtime is airing Fairy Tale Theater, an upbeat production of the classic fairy tale Sleeping Beauty about a prince played by Christopher Reeve, perfect casting, and his search for the perfect mate, Bernadette Peters. that must have been delightful. On a little later on Saturday night, after you watched Different Strokes, you could move on over to Silver Spoons. Edward's father, played by John Houseman, wants him to deliver a testimonial at a banquet honoring the elder Stratton, when Edward, Joel Higgins-Balk's Ricky, played by Ricky Schroeder, must mediate the ensuing battle of wills. And then, of course, Saturday night being Saturday night, Love Boat is on. I don't know that I was watching Love Boat at this time, but here's the episode. An employment agency owner, played by Don Adams, who is also Maxwell Smart in Get Smart, poses as the secretary requested by a cruise-bound client, played by Fannie Flagg. A quarterback, John Amos, tries to sneak through the defenses of a teacher, played by Jane Kennedy, and a musical message girl, played by Claudia Lano, delivers a zinging Valentine to a Romeo, played by Donnie Most, who was in Happy Days, from his no-show Juliet. And it says Donald Most instead of Donnie, but he was Donnie on Happy Days. Also airing is Quincy, which we liked watching. So Quincy was the forensic investigator, played by Jack Klugman. Also airing is the movie The World's Greatest Lover with Gene Wilder. And at the 10 o'clock hour, of course, Fantasy Island. A man, Steve Connolly, who was framed and spent 8 years in a foreign prison, wants to find a hidden treasure. A diplomat, Van Johnson, discovers he has a grown daughter, played by Charo. Fascinating. That would have been an amazingly very on-brand Fantasy Island episode. Saturday Night Live has Robert Guillaume hosting with Duran Duran, who will be singing Hungry Like the Wolf. So that tells you where we are in terms of music in 1983. On Sunday afternoon, they are airing How to Marry a Millionaire with Marilyn Monroe, Lauren Bacall, and Betty Grable. A fantastic movie, which I would not have been interested in watching in 1983. These days, I would absolutely stop and watch that movie, though. And you know what is so interesting? When I was just reading that ad for How to Marry a Millionaire, the logo for the TV station looked familiar, and I thought, that looks like that's KTLA's logo. I didn't realize this issue was delivered to someone who lived in Beverly Hills. I bought this off of somebody on eBay, but this person lived at 132 South Palm Drive in Beverly Hills, which I just think is so funny. I don't know why. That was literally about a half a mile from my apartment in Los Angeles. Crazy coincidence. All right, so Sunday night in our home, say it with me, my parents are watching 60 Minutes. Always and forever. The Billy Joel concert is on HBO this night. And if you're wanting to watch some good old broadcast television, One Day at a Time is on. And this is a conclusion, so I'm assuming the other episode aired the prior week. And it says, with Julie, Max, and the baby also needing a place to live, Anne takes refuge at Sam's place until he offers her a solution. There's a show that I vaguely remember called Matt Houston, played by Lee Horsley. I don't really remember it, just it's coming back to me now. The Jeffersons is on, so Florence, of course played by Marla Gibbs, thinks it's about time she had a pension plan and appeals to George, played by Sherman Hemsley, to provide for her retirement. That was a really good show. Okay, Newhart is on. Oh, did you hear my voice go up? I was so excited. I was like, Newhart is on. And this, I think, would be the second Newhart show. So George, played by Tom Poston, becomes the laughingstock of the town when he swears to have spotted a UFO in the woods. And now we're having congressional hearings about that. Not so funny now, huh? Okay. On the 10 o'clock hour, we've got Trapper John M.D., which I seem to remember watching. Gonzo's college pal says he has fatal degenerative disease, but looks mighty robust to Gonzo, played by Gregory Harrison. I think that's why I watched it. I thought Gregory Harrison was very handsome. Oh, you know it is airing, but it's a repeat. I don't know how many of you remember Brideshead Revisited. That was kind of a big deal around this time. So Charles was played by Jeremy Irons, and Sebastian was played by Anthony Andrews. I really loved that program, and I want to say that Sebastian's teddy bear was named Aloysius. I'm not going to look it up, but I think that was it. So we're going to move on over to Monday night. I did look for the talk shows Monday afternoon, but I didn't see anything. So I don't know if those perhaps have run their course by 1983. But we've got some good stuff going on for Monday night. First off, Square Pegs is on. I don't remember watching that show a lot, but it was a big deal at the time. And that's the one that featured Sarah Jessica Parker. So the romantic leads in the school musical lead to romance for Patty and Vinny. So Sarah Jessica Parker and John Colleary. But this one I thought was fascinating. Family Ties is on, which I definitely watched. But listen to this. Elise's brother, played by Tom Hanks, drops by unexpectedly, acting like someone's out to get him. Then FBI agents show up, trailing him in connection with a multi-million-dollar embezzlement. So I had to look this up. This is Tom Hanks post-Bosom Buddies, and I loved that show, but before Splash. So I just thought that was really interesting. There's an ad for a movie called Condominium. Corruption, love, and greed erupt with a killer hurricane. It's starring Barbara Eden, Dan Haggerty, Steve Forrest, and a whole bunch of other people. Dirty Harry is going to be airing, which we wouldn't have watched. The sitcom Private Benjamin, that was a spin-off from the, of course, amazing Goldie Hawn movie that I just watched last weekend, is on, but I don't remember caring for that. Something called Tucker's Witch is on, with Catherine Hicks and Tim Matheson. I don't remember a lot of these shows. I don't know if I just wasn't really watching at that point or what. I didn't really have a relationship with many of these shows. And at the 10 o'clock hour, we have Cagney and Lacey. Family responsibilities and job demands drive Mary Beth, of course played by Tyne Daly, to the brink of a nervous breakdown, and the last straw may be Samuel's demands that she cancel her vacation. I don't remember watching a lot of that. It's so iconic, though. I kind of remember a lot of the episodes, even though I don't know that I was a loyal watcher. And then we'll skip on over to Tuesday night. And I'll also say that it may be that television wasn't as great in this issue because it was summer reruns. And so they weren't always bringing their A game. Although speaking of A game, you know what is airing on Tuesday night is the A-Team. How is that for a good segue? Murdoch, played by Dwight Schultz, dons a bridal gown, and B.A., played of course by Mr. T, pops out of the cake at a wedding, forced by the groom to gain control of the company he shared with his fiancé's late father. I seem to remember that my mom liked that show because she liked George Peppard. Okay, and I can definitely tell you where I was on Tuesday night watching television, because where my cousin loved Knots Landing, I was freakily obsessed with Remington Steele because of Pierce Brosnan. Of course, I loved Remington Steele, and it is on Tuesday nights. So in this episode, sabotage in a TV studio makes the news team look like fools on the air, but nobody laughs when the weatherman drops from the rafters dead. So, of course, Pierce Brosnan and Stephanie Zimbalist as Laura. And I shared this in another episode, but I will share it with you again, that I first saw Pierce Brosnan on a television commercial for a mini-series called Manions of America with Kate Mulgrew. I don't even know what it was about. The Manions, I guess, coming to America from Ireland, perhaps. I don't know. But the part of the promo had Pierce Brosnan in 1700s or 1800s clothing. I don't know what century it was. But it involved tight pants, boots, a flowy, billowy white shirt. He has longish hair, and he's standing on a boat as Kate Mulgrew's character screams, "Rory!" And he looks like through the mist, and here's the most beautiful man I'd ever seen. And then I discovered that was Pierce Brosnan, and I loved him ever since. I don't love him with the same ferocity now, of course, now that I'm older, but in 1983, I was most certainly parked in front of the TV watching Remington Steele. And I will say, for sure, we did have a VCR because I recorded those obsessively and then hauled the VHS or beta tapes, I don't remember what we had at the time, probably beta, around with me for years, because at that point there was no sell-through video happening. So I couldn't buy the episodes of Remington Steele. I would have to record them. I guess Three's Company is still airing, but now it's with Priscilla Barnes, because Suzanne Summers would have left. I'm surprised that there was any overlap between Three's Company and Remington Steele. I didn't think they were on at the same era. I don't even know that I should share anything else about Tuesday night, because we could just stop with Remington Steele. But there's a spin-off of 9 to 5, which I don't remember watching at all. And then, now this is interesting, at the 10 o'clock hour, there are two really good shows on. First, St. Elsewhere. I loved that show. I loved medical dramas. I'm always a fan of a medical drama. St. Elsewhere, Chicago Hope, ER, New Amsterdam, The Resident, Grey's Anatomy. I'm even watching Hospital, which is a K-drama, a Korean drama on Netflix. I love a good medical drama. So in this one, Westfall's job is rumored to be on the line after he closes a ward where Legionnaire's disease is suspected. Fiscus, played by Howie Mandel, is mugged in the ER after treating a gang member. So I would have probably been watching that, but the reason that is in question is because Heart to Heart is on, and my mom loved that show. Jennifer, played by Stephanie Powers, wins a walk-on part in a successful soap opera whose plot spills over into real life when several persons with the show are murdered. But if we had a VCR at this point, I could have taped St. Elsewhere and my mother could have watched Heart to Heart. So we probably negotiated something like that. All right, we're coming to Wednesday. Honestly, there's nothing I'm excited about here. Real People was on. I don't know how many of you remember that show. I don't think I ever watched it. The Fall Guy, of course, with Lee Majors and Heather Thomas. Marky Post. I don't really remember that, although I'm sure I watched an episode or two of that in the day. Facts of Life. We can all sing the song together. I won't do that to you, though. I don't remember watching a lot of that show, but Blair's gadabout sister, played by Eve Plum, of course, Jan Brady, stuns everyone with her decision to become a nun, and Jo, played by Nancy McKeon, returns from a Yale weekend with stunning news of her own, first of 2 parts. Something called The Hamptons, which was a 5-part serial drama, set, of course, in the Hamptons. And then Dynasty is on, which I do remember being into. I think watching Dynasty was a thing. Adam, played by Gordon Thompson, plants seeds of dissension between Jeff and Blake, John James and John Forsythe. Alexis, played of course by Joan Collins, is outraged to learn that Crystal, of course played by Linda Evans, could become her grandson's mother. Jeff's violent behavior terrifies Fallon, and Pamela Sue Martin is still playing Fallon. Like, that was must-see TV, Dynasty, and the shoulder pads. I was definitely into wearing shoulder pads at that point because of Dynasty. And just to confirm that, there is an ad for one of the local TV stations saying Dynasty Mania. Linda Evans and Joan Collins described the symptoms, so I was correct. Dynasty was huge back then. Okay, Thursday options include Magnum PI, which my mother loved because she loved Tom Selleck, and yes, she also watched Blue Bloods. So that would have been on. And then the show Fame. I loved the movie. I don't know that I was that crazy about the TV show. That was on. Simon and Simon is on, which I kind of remember, with Gerald McCraney and Jameson Parker. Give Me a Break was on. I don't know that I was watching a lot of these shows. For my friend David, also because you grew up in the LA area, maybe you were watching Audrey Rose, which was on Channel 13. And then we come to Knots Landing, which is airing on Thursday night, opposite of Hill Street Blues. So we would not have been watching Knots Landing. We would have been watching Hill Street Blues. But here's what was happening that week on Knots Landing. Material from Val's stolen manuscript appears in a scandal sheet exposing Gary's private life. A squabble among friends and family disrupts Karen and Mac's wedding rehearsal. CG, played by Lisa Hartman, urges Chip, played by Michael Sabatino, to marry her. Okay, and then on Hill Street Blues, Lucy, played by Betty Thomas, poses as a bus driver to catch a gang terrorizing writers. The citizenry is becoming hostile over the jail death of Tatum, and City Hall may offer Coffee, played by Ed Marinaro, as transfers to another precinct. The relationship of Farillo and Joyce, played of course by Daniel J. Travanti and Veronica Hamill, takes an unexpected turn. We were a Hill Street Blues family, I seem to recall. And on Friday night, we've got Dukes of Hazzard. I don't remember watching too much of that. Okay, a little behind the scenes things. I am messing up everything I'm reading and have to re-record it. And that just happened with the Dukes of Hazzard episode. Summary. I will try this again. A deputy, played by Tracy Scoggins, on prisoner escort duty, displays a greed that warms Hogg's larcenous heart. Okay, I don't remember this particular show, but I remember the actor, the powers of Matthew Starr. And Matthew was played by Peter Barton, who I thought was cute, but I do not remember watching the show. Benson is on, of course, played brilliantly by Robert Guillaume. And then on Friday night, we also have Falcon Crest, which I was not watching at the time. The note found on the comatose body is traced to Maggie's typewriter. Lance, of course played by Lorenzo Lamas, visits a divorce lawyer. Richard is ordered to abandon his plans and the newspaper. And that, my friends, brings us to the end of television programming for the week that was. In July of 1983, we do have the television crossword puzzle. So, one down, Orville or Wilbur, which of course would be right. The Amityville blank, horror, of course. Actor blank, Charlson. I don't know that one. Charlson, blank Charlson. Well, write in if you know the answer. I started reading it because I thought it was Charlton Heston, but that, of course, would not be blank Charlson. Leslie, well, I know there's an actress named Leslie Charlson who played Monica, of course, on General Hospital, but they said actor, and I don't think it would be her. Wow, I don't know a lot of these. Well, there's blank Wells, which would be Orson Welles, so I would get that one. The blank Chase would be The Paper Chase. But there's some I don't know. For instance, do you know what the killer whale movie was? I don't. Maybe you do, though, so I shouldn't leave these out. I shouldn't withhold things. Well, then there's Muhammad Blank, which at that point in 1983 would be Muhammad Ali. There's blank Close for Comfort, would be Too Close for Comfort. Let's see, 55 down would be blank God, which would be Oh God. I think that's the John Denver, George Burns movie, right? That was Oh God versus Dear God. I think Dear God came later. But Oh God, at least the one with George Burns and John Denver, is such a good movie. I'll have to go find that and watch that again. Loved that movie. And so, my friends, this will bring us to the end of this very special episode where we pay tribute to Knots Landing and 1983 television in the summer of 1983. We celebrate that Remington Steele existed, and so did a VCR, so I could record my episodes. It was a good time. It was a time of dynasty. It was a time of very big hair and shoulder pads, and everything was more. You know that rule that they say that when you're, for women anyways, like when you're getting dressed to go out and you've put on all your jewelry, take off one piece. The 80s would have been put 5 more on. We were about rhinestones. We were about big clothes. Just watch an episode of Dynasty and you will see what we were being inspired by. So here's to 1983. 40 years ago. Unbelievable. So, my beautiful friends, thank you for allowing me the blessing of spending this time with you. I wish you the sweetest of dreams. I wish you blessings of love. And I look forward to connecting again soon. I love you. Thank you.